say you and your husband. God, that was God's choice from the foundation. That's it. And according to biblical rules, if you and your husband were to get a divorce, you cannot marry anybody else. If you want to be married again, you have to reunite. That is called the God kind of marriage, or as stated in Matthew 19, verse 6 about there, it says that is called the whom God has put together. Let no man put asunder. That key verse is saying to you, not every marriage is from God. I'm making these claims first, these disclaimers according to scripture, because where we're going next to answer this question is strictly scripture based, because it gives two separate rules for the two separate marriages, right? So if we quickly go here to Matthew chapter 19, and it says here in verse 5, this is when the Pharisees came at Jesus asking him the situation about marriage, remarriage, divorce, and so on. And verse 5 of Matthew 19 says, and said, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, this is Jesus speaking, and shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one. Verse 6 says, wherefore, this is Jesus speaking, wherefore they are no longer two, but one. What therefore God had joined together, let no man put asunder. Now the truth was, if all marriages were the same, we didn't need that statement right there. Why would he make this separation? Because he's saying, if the statement is what therefore God joined together, let no man put asunder, then it's saying that if something is not joined by God, which is not the will of God, then man does have the right to put it asunder. But again, we're not getting into that. We just want to answer the question. So with that said, let's quickly go over here to 1 Corinthians to answer this person's question. Here it is, you are with a person, they're a provider, they're all this stuff, but they don't serve God, they're not a Christian, they're a sweetheart or side peacekeeper, and all of this other stuff. Should I get my directives from him or whatever the case may be? Well, generally, yeah, because he is the head, but there's more to it. So let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, okay? And you're going to see here where the Apostle Paul is going to now elaborate on the statement that Jesus made in Matthew about this whom God has put together, clearly making a distinction that there are two types of marriages. So 1 Corinthians 7 says, beginning at 1, now concerning the things wherefore ye wrote unto me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, to avoid fornication, let every man have his own wife, and let every woman have her own husband. Mm-hmm. Let the husband render unto the wife due benevolence, and likewise also the wife unto the man. The wife had no power. She had no power over her own body, but the husband, and likewise also the husband had no power of his own body, but his body belongs to his wife. Verse 5 now begins to go into what we're talking about. He says, defraud ye not one another, except, in other words, do not deprive each other of your intimacy, except, very clear here now, except it be with consent, where both of you agree for a time that you may be given yourselves to fasting and prayer, come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency, right? But I speak this by permission and not of commandment. All right. Now I want us to drop to verse 12, because this what he's talking about here. He's talking about the marriage that is ordained by God. Okay, that's what he's talking about. When you drop to verse 12, listen to the language. But to the rest, remember what this whole entire thing is about. He's talking about marriage. He's talking about the virgins, and then if you can't handle yourself, get married so you don't be fornicating and so on. Now that you're married in the will of God, this is the purpose for your life. These are the rules that you follow. That's the ordained. That's the marriage that Jesus referred to, whom God has put together. Let no man put asunder. Why? Because this is the will of God. Anyone who doesn't believe what I just said just now are simultaneously saying that every marriage that ever takes place on this earth was ordained by God. And we all know that that's not true, right? So verse 12 says, but to the rest, or to the ones who married outside of the will of God. But to the rest, I, not the Lord, if any brother had a wife that believed not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. Don't divorce her. Don't separate from her. Don't do that because you say, oh, this ain't the will of God for my life. No. You're in a covenant. And the Bible isn't in any way trying to promote divorce because you didn't connect with the right person. It's saying, well, live the best you could with this choice that you made. Verse 13 says, and the woman which had a husband and believed not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. Now, sorry, for the unbelieving husband, listen carefully now, because this answers the question. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife. Kevin, this man, okay, he takes care of the family, but he got sweethearts. He's very much unfaithful to me, so on and so forth. So how does the rules work for me if this isn't the will of God? Well, the Bible is saying in this particular position, even though this may not be the one call for you to be with, it says that the rules make you who is joined to him, he is sanctified as a result of you. So what that is saying in so many words, unlike the marriage called by God, even if he say, well, look, I don't care what you want going no fast. I want it now, or whatever the case may be. The Bible is very clear. The husband, and vice versa, is sanctified via or because of the believing spouse. But he doesn't end there. Which he says in verse 14 of 1 Corinthians 7, he says, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else, if this wasn't the case, if God didn't permit this, even though you're not equally yoked, even though you're not supposed to be together, he says, outside of this, else were your children unclean,